The food service, hospitality, and retail industries are evolving in ways you've never heard of until now. Hosted by global industry technovator Rob Grimes and powered by the IFBTA, Techbytes is your go-to podcast, putting technology innovation and trends on the menu.
Welcome back to another episode of the Techbytes podcast powered by the IFBTA. I'm Rob Grimes, your host. And this week, I'm very excited to have a conversation with, my boss, Don Zimmerman, who was the senior vice president and chief information officer of Landry's. So welcome, Don.
Thank you, Rob. Glad to be here.
So I'm going to guess that our listeners probably just learned two things. A, they learned that you're my boss. And B, they might have just learned, if they didn't read it online somewhere or haven't heard, that you have actually retired from Landry's.
It's true. I'm in my third week of retirement after 44 years in the industry. So I'm certainly adjusting still for many reasons.
So have you figured out what you're going to be doing, or is it really retirement?
Well, my pat answer is I'm going to do all the things that I never had time to do while I was working full time. But I think, there's still some involvement that I'll have in the industry around different methods of engagement with what's going on. I don't want to leave it completely, but I also don't want to just do that. So I've got a variety of things that I'm going to focus on.
Well, it's hard to actually leave this industry behind. And you did say, I think you said 44 years.
I did.
I'm not going to admit that we've known each other a large part of that.
We have.
I just did. However, your career wasn't always in food service, but I guess it's always been in tech.
It has.
So can we just sort of take a little bit of a journey here and where you started? Because I think people are going to find it rather interesting that your perspective in technology building up to this last position comes from a number of different areas.
Yeah, coming out of college, I actually had an accounting degree and a computer science minor. And the computer science minor really got me hooked in the technology space. So when I came out, that's what I wanted to do. And I started out in consumer products with PepsiCo, moved from there into retail with Sears, Roebuck and Company. And then from that experience, after about 10 years, moved into the restaurant space, first with Arby's and Wendy's, and then into the full service space, which is what Landry's is all about on the restaurant side, at least. So that's a
did
quick
you ever
snapshot,
expect it? But it's all basically IT, but from an accounting background.
No, accounting was my business degree, but I think most of my focus has been on the technology side. It was all in IT, except for about 5 years in between the Arby's and Landry's space. I did 5 years with NCR as a product owner for the restaurant products that come out of NCR. That's the first time I stepped out of true IT onto the other side of the table. And
but wait a minute, but that's IT. I mean, you're just offering
it
the
is,
IT
it
instead
is.
of being
I was a
user
provider
IT, right?
versus a user or consumer of the technology, if you will.
So that leads to a number of different rabbit holes to go down. So let me just think about this one for a second. I'm digesting the consumer product side with Frito-Lay actually as part of PepsiCo. Mm-hmm. Did you find that, you went from there and then you went into retail, but you didn't go into retail food.
Right.
But did you find that early start working with those types of products, which were sold in convenience stores, and they also had restaurants, I guess, at the time, but I don't think you were in that side of it, right?
Right.
Did that help you in understanding a piece of the business or the retail part too, as it related to things like supply chain and the marketing ends and the different pieces like that?
I did. I thought more specifically, it really was my formative period of learning tech, learning business, not what we learned in college, but how the way it actually works. And PepsiCo / Frito-Lay was is a great company, was then too. And we did a lot of different things around the distribution space, manufacturing, warehousing, um, putting the product actually on the shelves and using technology to make that a much more efficient process. I was there while we introduced the handheld computers into the up and down the street salespeople and the trucks, and that was revolutionary. And you look back now at those computers, they were something else compared to what we can do today, but it changed the business and made a lot more efficiency and effective service come available for our customers. After about a dozen years of that, went into retail. And of course, retail is a lot of the same distribution, warehousing. You've still got to entice people to come to your door and buy the product, but getting the product at the right price to the right place was a very important part of that as well, as you know.
Well, it did. And what was it that, there are all kinds of reasons why people switch areas, but why did you, I would think that going into retail, really, if you consider the food service industry and restaurants is a part of retail. You even consider that NCR's presence is in retail as
That's
well.
right.
Was it feeling different to leave, the supply chain side and the food product side, and then go actually into the operation side of retail and restaurants?
Yeah, although a lot of what I did, even at Sears, was in the operational side of the business. But yeah, it was. I used to describe it as a lot of similarity between retail and restaurant when I made that switch. The size of the box, the restaurant or the building was smaller. So you had a lot more of them. They were smaller, but they still needed all the same capabilities that you needed in a big retail establishment to support the customers, to support the operation. And what that really kind of forced us to think about was how to do it efficiently on a scale that was workable for restaurants, whereas a big box retailer could afford a whole lot of different things. The needs were the same, but the solutions were different.
Now, when you made the move over to the restaurant industry, first of all, you started on the Arby side,
Mm-hmm.
but you got involved in an acquisition that merged Arby's and Wendy's.
That's right.
And that was pretty early on. That probably had to be one of the larger mergers of its time, within our industry, of two brands, but yet leaving them as separate brands.
Yeah, I don't know how it compared to the size of others in the industry, but it certainly felt big. And what was unique about it was the smaller company acquired the larger. Arby's actually acquired Wendy's, merged them together. And the whole strategy behind that was leveraging everything that didn't matter to the consumer. So everything in the back office, all the technology, distribution, et cetera, but keep the consumer face unique to each of those brands. And we didn't really care if the consumer knew that Wendy's and Arby's were together in the back end. We just wanted them to come enjoy whichever
Yeah,
product.
but the interesting thing about it, and I think you and I met somewhere during this period of time, is not only did you bring them together, but then you actually split them apart.
Yes. We achieved all the synergies that we had signed up for, and we're feeling pretty good about having completed 3 years of that integration work, only to then decide, that was all good, but Wall Street's not really liking what we did, so we're going to split the two apart. And so we did that. Now, each of them had much improved technology and infrastructures, but it was still a little bit emotional, I'll say, to go through all that work and then tear them apart and split the teams that we'd put together and things like that. But that's the way business happens.
But
sometimes.
that would seem to be a reason why people would possibly do outsourcing of things like data centers and pieces like that. But yet it wasn't readily available all the way across the board in the industry, even in the during those times. Or maybe you guys looked at that as a possibility.
We did a little bit. I think were that to be what we tried to do today, it'd be very different solutioning. Like you said, the outsourcing options were there, but one of the things we had to do to support the business plan behind the merger was take out a bunch of cost. Both sides had redundant costs. We had to take that out. We invested in a lot of new things, but those new things still had to be cost effective for the size of the operation we were going forward with. Today, I think we could have used a lot more external, even data centers and technologies, but when we did this, it was still a little bit nascent.
So you said the smaller group acquired the bigger group, but the bigger group was global. I don't think that the Arby's group was global.
Arby's, didn't have as much global footprint. There was a little bit, but not compared to Wendy's.
Was that your first foray into doing, global operations?
Actually, PepsiCo, I had the technology for PepsiCo Foods International. So the snack business outside of the U.S. was called PepsiCo Foods International. A lot of the same products, some of the same brands. But that was my intro to international business and the requirements and the uniqueness that comes with that.
So we're going to go ahead and take a break in a few minutes and really focus on sort of the here and now of things. But let's say we drew a line that said that before you made that transition to NCR and then into Landry, so that would be, I guess, the last 10 years or so. Mm-hmm. That'd be about the last 10 years. So before that, if we look at technology in our industry, what do where has the focus been, or where was your focus? Which technologies were you most focused on at the time in the first part, and where did you, where'd you spend your time? Where'd you spend your money? And do you think they're the same? Because I once had somebody sit on a panel that told me they took a 10-year break outside the industry, a coffee break. They came back and nothing had changed. So, as you take a look at the technologies you're working with the global pieces, we always have the point of sale, but what was the focus, of where you spent most of your time?
It was split. I won't say 50-50, but it was split because everything we did in those deals in those periods of time was to create efficiency of operation. So we had to focus on where the big dollars were and where we could leverage that into something more cost effective. So a lot of it was, I will say, back office, whether that's data centers, the technology in the data centers. Telecommunications was a big focus area. That was maybe slightly more than half of the focus. Then the other half was in the restaurant. And how many different point of sale systems do we have? And can we operate them efficiently? I can tell you the specifics. No, we couldn't. And there were a lot of opportunities to focus there as well. But more of it was in the back office because it was all driven by a lot of M&A activity.
But also if you're talking about the point of sale was something that you couldn't necessarily pull together, I think that the environment of franchisees at that time and this idea of mandates of technology was also different, because you must have been dealing with a lot of people that had early operating agreements that basically allowed them to do what they wanted to do in technology. Plus, some of the technologies of today, like loyalty and gift cards and things like that, were probably only starting to emerge.
That's exactly right. That brings me specifically to the Wendy's experience. We worked to, like I said, leverage the back office, the technology, the infrastructure, whatever you want to call it. And then we decided to split the two apart. When we did that, I stayed with the Wendy's side. I felt like there was more opportunity. There were more restaurants.
Did you have a choice?
I did. And
okay.
So I moved with Wendy's when we split the two apart. And then we started to focus on the restaurant technology. And specifically at that time, I think there were over 400 franchise organizations that made up the Wendy's total. And just like you said, a lot of them had been there when Dave Thomas started the company. Many had handshake agreements. They didn't even have a formal contract. So we had to, but what we also saw, if you can put yourself back in that time frame, I know you can, but our listeners maybe can as well. We knew that ordering and loyalty and payments were going to change. And at the time we started to have these conversations internally and socialize that, we had over 20 different point of sale systems, the majority of which were 20 plus years old and couldn't do any of the stuff we just mentioned. So we knew we had to do something to be ready for what was coming. Starbucks was already out there showing people what could happen with mobile technology in I'll call them restaurants, but in shops. And we knew there was a lot of interest, but we were not ready for it. So that became the primary focus after we split Wendy's apart. And to do that, we had to work with the franchise organizations to get them on board and show them the value of what they had to invest in. Because as one of them or many of them told me, for me, it was a job, for them, it was their life. And so anything that I asked them to spend money on was money out of their pocket. And I get that, but we had to do it.
Well, I think that, clearly that always was the challenge when it came to technology, and people were always trying to find ways to sort of either hide the technology, not use the word mandate, but really create a reason. And it's probably the newer technologies and the newer things that people want to do, like the gift cards and loyalty and pieces that make the environment that people need to put it in, that they can't achieve it and compete if they don't have it.
That's right. And as you can imagine, a group of 400 different independent entrepreneurs, some got it right away. And some, maybe got it, but didn't want to do it. So we did end up having to mandate as well to get the ship all on the same track. And
right.
That was messy, but it took time. But, I can't imagine where Wendy's would be if we hadn't done that.
Well, listen, we're having a conversation with Don Zimmerman, who is recently retired, but still somehow figuring out that he's in the game. And we're going to continue the conversation and take a look at the last 10 years and some observations and his thoughts of the future. But let's just take a quick break and we'll be right back.
With the rapid expansion of technology in the food and beverage industries, finding the right supplier can become overwhelming and complicated. To simplify this process, the IFBTA created Exchange. Exchange is a powerful search tool where users can easily narrow down their technology search and refine results by application type, geography served, department, and more. Browse resources and learn more about the industry's technology suppliers at exchange.ifbta.org. Now, back to the show.
So welcome back, and I'm being joined in conversation today with a longtime friend, acquaintance, industry partner, and boss, Don Zimmerman, who recently has stepped down, and he says he's retiring from Landry's. And we're having this conversation, but we've taken a look at the early part of his career that really was with Wendy's, with Arby's, with Sears, and with Frito-Lay, with Pepsi, and how those experiences sort of shaped things to come. Now, you did an interesting turn, and you decided to go work for NCR Search as a chief technology officer and really doing the solutions side of it. So after all this time, and if I think about your resume, you never were on the supplier side of this. So what made you decide to take that leap?
I think the biggest driver was I was looking to do something different and get a little different twist on things. I'd used the NCR products, so I was familiar with many of the people. The organization knew that there was a lot of change in the wind, if you will. And it looked like a good opportunity to try something new. And it was. It was a great experience. And, hopefully my experience made a difference in some of the products that we put on the market during that period of time I was there.
Well, was there something that, in making the shift over to the supplier side of this, but bringing all your industry knowledge with you, was there something that sort of surprised you that maybe you thought you understood how that would operate or how the systems were developed or things? Because I know you'd run projects before, obviously, for the operators and the retailers and people you work with, but this was the first time that the customer was not, a guest out there or a franchisee. It's actually all the all the operators in the industry.
Yeah, I think you asked the question, so I'll just answer it because it is a real answer. And that is, I was somewhat surprised, although not totally, at the tension that you have to, or the line you have to walk as a technology provider between talking about what your product does, which is easy, and what it's going to do versus what you can deliver today. So that balance of here's where we're going and these are the things we're going to do, getting customers excited about it, and then you've got to make sure that you actually deliver and can deliver in the time window that you put yourself out there saying this is what we're going to do and where we're going with the product. That tension, I don't think I realized to the extent when I was on the receiving side, because I'd listen, I'd hear, okay, I want that. I often would meet with providers and say, look, before we get going on your briefing, tell me if what you're going to tell me about is real now in the product GA and I can buy it today versus when you're going to tell me about a future thing. Because I knew it was a thing, but being on the side of trying to meet the needs of consumers and answering the questions when customers rather, and answering the questions when they ask, when is that going to be available? And you put yourself out there and you have to give a date, and you do the best date you can given the dynamics of your organization. But yeah, I didn't like that a whole lot. That was a hard thing to do, even
Well,
though I
you're also
recognize the
dependent
reality
upon
of it.
other people, to deliver on that, and things happen, right?
Yeah. It was a challenge, and I'm sure all software companies do that. All tech companies do that. Um, the tighter the relationship between the product team, which is what I represented, and the engineering team that delivers, that's a real important aspect. And during the 5 years I was there, we changed organization structures several times. So depending on the model, some of those relationships were better than others.
Did you also get involved in some of the cross-industry technologies with the retailing side of things?
There was some of that. There were a few things that we started to look at that we felt like could cross over or should cross over between, restaurants and retail. And I think that's part of what they have now realigned more effectively in the structure that NCR has today than what we did back 5 years ago. But we did a little bit of that coming out of the chute.
Well, it has to be very interesting, working with a company that it's funny because outside of the door of my office, is a 1899 NCR cash register.
Mm-hmm.
And then sitting in my office is a 1910, brassy cash register.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's got to be an amazing thing to work with, one of the oldest and best known companies in the cash register business, point of sale business, and then helping to drive, the solutions and the technology that the whole industry globally is going to be looking
Right.
at.
Yeah, and that actually points to one of the other big challenges that I, realized being in the role, and that is when you have as much history and as many long-time customers and long-time tech that customers depend on every day, and want to move it into the future and all the stuff that comes with that, it's a big burden because you don't want to leave any customer behind. You don't want to leave any tech behind, but to carry it all forward into the new world as things evolve and change more rapidly all the time, that's a big load. And I think they're still fighting that. We certainly fought it while I was there. And once in a while, you have to make the hard call and say, we're going to end this. And either replace it or point your customers to something else. But those are tough conversations to have when someone has bet their career and bet their business on you.
Well, it is. Plus, they are truly a global company as well. So now in a product development, you're not just, I wasn't the accountant, so I can't do all the math here. You probably can figure this out really fast. But, if you start to take let's say, the major geographies, and you could say, let's say, 20 major countries around the world. I always say that when I look at, all right, what's the footprint of a McDonald's, or what's the footprint of a Yum? Which countries do they choose that they have 500 units in or more? So if you pick the major footprints around the world, and then you have all those regional differences and fiscal printing and all the different things that you need to do, and cultures, and then couple it with chains that are operating globally, but also a customer base that's regional. I imagine that that's a big challenge, and C, I don't know how or B, C, I'm definitely not in the English department either, but also in B, it's not only challenge to meet local and local types of systems, but also there's the customers, the end users that have to use them. And then, there's other technologies and competitors. I don't know how you do all that.
You have to balance the desire of, I'll say, the sales organization to go find every customer, no matter what market they were in, especially if you're thinking globally or outside the U.S., and the size of that market. Because every one of those, as you just pointed out, brings a unique requirement, whether it's fiscal printing or different payment methods or tax laws or whatever. And I think we found ourselves at one point being in too many small markets, and that's also one of those overheads then that you kind of own forever. And when I was at Wendy's, I was actually one of the customers that forced NCR, if you will. Maybe that's not too strong a word, but to go into the Republic of Georgia. And while I was there, I kept getting chided every once in a while about, yeah, you made us go here. Now look at all the stuff we have to do just for a couple dozen restaurants. But when you're the operator and you want to have consistency, that's what you need. But when you're the provider, the compounding effect of the uniqueness that has to be built into those products is pretty daunting sometimes.
Well, look, I mean, so now you do your stint there, and I'm trying to think about the calendar now, because I'm looking at COVID in here, and I think you must have transferred and transitioned over to Landry's right in the beginning or in the middle of COVID.
Yeah, it was actually 4 years ago, I think this week or next, right in the middle of COVID in 2020. And I had started the conversation. I found myself wanting to get back to the operator IT side. And I had started conversations with Landry's, January, if you will. I knew about their opening, and they were a customer. So I just started having conversations with them. We got started down the path, and then COVID hit, the lockdown hit, if you will. So we put it on ice for a while and then picked it up, I'd say summertime of 2020. NCR was locked down. We were working full-time remote, as a lot of companies, most companies probably were. But, Landry's wanted to move forward. They needed help stabilizing the IT organization at that time, and doing things that they felt they needed to do technically to survive, and then come out of the COVID shutdown even stronger. So that accelerated our conversations. I took the bait and joined the organization July 4 years ago.
Well, now you joined an organization, though, that was very broad. Not only the number of restaurant brands that you had, but you also had hotels and you had casinos in there. And I got a strange feeling there's probably something else in there I'm not thinking of, but that's another learning experience because you're working in some other industries now.
Yeah, exactly. And that was one of the attractions. If I was going to go back into the role similar to what I had at Wendy's and Arby's, I wanted some breadth change. And you're exactly right. 600 restaurants, all full service, but also casinos, which I'll come back to, as well as amusements. And when you think about a casino, that isn't just the gaming floor and all that goes
Right.
with that, but you've got restaurants, you've got bars, multiples in ours,
Retail
and hotels. And so it really was a microcosm of a lot of the industries that are related. And I had some experience with, at least I didn't have hotels, but the restaurants and the retail came together with that move.
Well, that had to open, your eyes to a whole bunch of new types of technology as well that you had not worked with before.
That's right.
Now, interestingly enough, and I always, say that it's a small world, but at one point in your early part of your career with Sears, you worked with a guy named Mike Blake.
That's right.
And Mike Blake went on to be CIO at Hyatt, and then HT&G, and working with the H&LA. And so, if you needed the help, I don't know, did you keep in touch and at least ask him for that kind of help?
Well, and interesting, when I knew Mike back in that day, he was in finance. So, he wasn't in the IT side. He was finance for IT, but he was more in the financial departments at Sears. So, yeah, we touch base every once in a while, but I don't know that I called him for help.
Well, okay, we won't tell him that. But now he's back in operations anyway. I think he's doing golf, out there. He's a big golf club. Good thing for you if you're going to the Chicago area. Well, listen, before we get off, I'm curious with the number of years of experience and the number of different places that you've been and the things you've seen in the industry. What would you say was your greatest accomplishment, in the IT world in food service?
I guess I would point to, that's a tough one because there were different eras and different things that I was really felt good about. But if you take the whole of the experience, I think getting Wendy's on track to be part of the digital future then, digital now, present, I would probably point to that. When we split them off and I went back and just focused on Wendy's and moved to Ohio with them, I had people tell me, look, we've been trying to get our POS sorted out for 10 years and haven't made any progress. And that was a little bit of motivation to say, well, we're going to have to do it this time. And while it wasn't easy, it was absolutely essential, as I mentioned earlier in the conversation. And I think it set us up for ordering and loyalty and commonality of payments and consistency of data coming out of the back end. Was it perfect? Was it absolutely smooth? Of course not. But it was necessary for where the business needed to go. And I think if I had to pick one thing, that would probably be it. But every place I've been, there's something I would highlight.
Well, of course, yeah. Is there something that is either your largest regret or something that you just, wish that you could change or you could get a do-over on?
I wish we could have gotten the franchisees all on board without a mandate. I don't know that would have been possible. So I do go back to that and say, could we have approached it differently? That's the first thing that comes to mind.
Well, so I'm tempted, it's coming out of my mouth here, but just to sort of ask you, was there a favorite position or job or company, during this period of time? And you don't have to answer that, but, or maybe the most fun?
Oh, wow.
Or challenging?
Well, sure. Those are different questions. I'll go back to my PepsiCo Frito-Lay experience. I was there 12 years. That was absolutely the most formative period of time for me, both on the tech side and the leadership side. And so it always has a special place in my heart, if you will. But what we did at Wendy's and Arby's was fantastic. And very exhilarating, and it included M&A and modernization and standardization and simplification and everything else that you want to tie to it. The product experience at NCR, while it was challenging, was unique and brought new facets to what I thought I understood and helped me do that a different way. And then I loved the Landry's experience, even though it was only 4 years. It was such an eye-opener to bring more than just restaurant and retail to the table and the challenges that come and the unique requirements along with the challenges that come with gaming, the hotels, a unique thing. But what really that sets up is how we can take those businesses and create personalized experiences for the consumers, because they don't typically just eat at a restaurant. They use the casinos, they use the hotels, they may go to the Rockets games, whatever it might be, and bringing that all together into a clear vision of the customer is, I think, where the next big wave is for that company, and that's where we're headed.
Well, listen, before we close this one off, first of all, I want to thank you for, sharing, a lifetime of experience and service to the industry and making a difference, because some of those things that you did, both with the Wendy's group and then Landry's, the last piece, but also with NCR, are ones that continue to have a lasting impression on the industry. But I appreciate the fact that you shared sort of the near and dear to your heart and the early experience with Frito-Lay PepsiCo. So I guess one has to wonder, and I know they have a lot more today, but what's your favorite chip or your favorite brand within that? I've been to their offices in Dallas, and they have that huge, store at the front. They got them everywhere. So what's your favorite?
Well, and just to add to what you said, we used to have open bags on conference room tables and administrative desks and everything, so you couldn't walk anywhere without having an open bag and grab a handful. I am a Cheetos guy. I really like the simple ones, the newer version of the Cheetos, and I'm still a Frito-Lay, a Frito guy. The scoops are my thing. I like the
but there's so many different
chip.
flavors today and permutations of these things, and they even do these pop-up restaurants where they create food brands out of it.
Yeah.
So it's a great thing. Well, listen, Don, thank you for joining us today in conversation here. And I suspect that there really isn't such a thing as retirement for you or in this industry, but I'll look forward to seeing where those things go. So thank you for joining us.
You bet. Thanks, Rob.
So this podcast is brought to you by the International Food and Beverage Technology Association. The IFBTA is the industry's voice of technology within the food and beverage industries, providing thought leadership as a single, impartial, and go-to resource. The IFBTA offers in-person and online communities to connect with your peers, the exchange, an all-encompassing global technology resource, and an industry-wide professional education and certification program. The bottom line is the IFBTA is your place to gather, learn, and share. So thank you for joining Don and me on this episode of Techbytes powered by the IFBTA. I'm Rob Grimes, your host, and I look forward to taking our next bite of technology together.